Hello, church. This is Keith Fair, pastor for Faith Formation and Discipleship at St. Matthew Lutheran Church in York, Pennsylvania. We are part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and this is the Preaching Points video for the upcoming 18th Sunday after Pentecost. We're taking a look at Matthew chapter 21, 33 through 46. Now, we're changing up the format of these Preaching Points videos just a little bit, trying to narrow down the commentary. So since the passage this week is fairly long, I'm not going to read it directly, but I'll say that it's a continuation of last week's encounter between Jesus and the temple leadership on their home turf in the Jerusalem temple. And again, we're picking up in Matthew chapter 21. Last week we were in about the middle of that chapter, and this week we're starting at verse 33 and reading through the end. So the temple leaders came to ask Jesus about his authority last week. And Jesus responds to them first by asking about the authority of John the Baptist, a question which they dodged. And then Jesus went on to tell a parable about two sons going to work in their father's vineyard. And this week, Jesus tells another story about a vineyard, but this time he reimagines an older story from Isaiah about a vineyard, which in Isaiah serves as a metaphor for the children of Israel. See, in the story that Jesus tells, the vineyard has been leased to tenant farmers. This was a common practice in Jesus' day. At harvest time, the farmers would turn over a part of their crop as payment to the landowner. And if they didn't, the landowner would kick them out, forcefully, if necessary, paying somebody if they had to, and simply find new tenants. But because the landowner was the one with all the power in that scenario. But in the parable that Jesus tells, when the landowner's slaves arrive to collect the payment, the tenant farmers beat some of them and kill the others. The landowner sends more slaves, but they're treated the same way. And in Isaiah, God was the caretaker of the vineyard, but despite all of God's careful efforts, the crop wasn't suitable for making wine. It was wild, sour grapes. In Jesus' story, the crop is fine. It's the violent refusal to pay the bill that's the problem. So the landowner decides to turn up the pressure. Instead of sending more slaves, he says, I'll send my son. They'll respect my son. But they don't. Instead, the tenants kill the son too, looking to claim his inheritance, possibly the very land that they are occupying. And as Jesus concludes his story, his audience, the temple leadership, recognize his criticism of their caretaking of the people. So for us, I think all of this points to a question. How are we ourselves caretakers of what God has entrusted to us? How do we nurture relationships with others, even in the midst of a global pandemic, even surrounded by a society that seems marked by division much more than unity, and even encourages it? How do we, day by day, in big ways and in small ways, honor the calling issued in our baptism to love God, to love God's people, and to care for God's world? Those are the questions that I will leave you with. That's it for this week. I encourage you to read Matthew 21, 33 to 46 for yourself. Join us for the sermon in worship this Sunday. Until then, stay safe and God bless.